Hello, and welcome back for another week of the Academy of Shem and Aver. I'm Rabbi David Katz. This is our 22nd installment. For the last 2 or 3 weeks, we have been going over our subtopic of Jethro, who, in the language of the rabbinic writings over time, he is the quintessential convert. And as much as this applies to a convert to Judaism, when we look at the text of commentators to the Torah, such as Rashi, we find that Jethro, as much as he did convert to Judaism as a possibility, there's an even stronger possibility that he converted to, for the lack of a better term, Noahidism. I'm not so much of a fan of speaking of the word Noahide as an ism. I prefer to call it a conversion to God. Conversion to God. I think that's the best way that Jethro can be explained. The Talmud states that a convert to Judaism converts out of the fear of God. And we're not talking about the fear on the level of awe or reverence, just a basic fear, of which the Torah says this is harsh on Israel. But the Noahide of Jethro is on really a fantastic level of awareness of God. That Jethro is forced to be in conversion to God. That God has graced Jethro with tremendous revelation, such that the Torah says, I saw or heard all that Hashem did to the Jewish people. Jethro then, not the past tense of converted, but the present continuous, he was in conversion to God, even against his will. God made it so great of a revelation that Jethro turned to God. And that was his conversion. He was in a conversion to returning to God. And when we look at Jethro in the light of his conversion, we see that really the rabbinical writings in the Torah verses really speak wonderfully about Jethro the Noahide, as opposed to Jethro the Jew. Now there is another facet we can get into. Is it wrong to suggest that Jethro converted to Judaism? Now, we already said that the most basic understanding is he converted to Judaism. Then we said when we look at the Torah a little deeper, we can find really it was a conversion to God. But then, what about the idea of conversion to Judaism? So the fact is, really, it could be both. By the principles laid down in Talmudic study, the ambiguous nature of the verses, was he in conversion to as a Noahide or as a Jew? We can ultimately take it either way. Either way is possible. Neither are refutable. We just say that the Noahide conversion makes more sense for all the things that we've outlined so far. He didn't come back to the Jewish people at the end, which by nature a convert to Judaism would have come back. And just nowhere do we find any strong inclination that he converted to Judaism. So then we say the conversion to Noahide and the conversion to God really makes the most sense. But then again, maybe he converted to Judaism after he became a Noahide. And thus that's where we find the conversion to Judaism really would make sense, if he were to in fact convert to Judaism. And I think what Jethro is showing us in the Torah is he's outlining for us a major principle. Is that one can convert to Judaism directly. Just one day you're not Jewish, and then you become interested in Judaism. In the end, you convert, and you are now a Jew. And the question is posed, do we find Jethro's sons in Nach? Yes. That is where we find out that Jethro's family, in fact, did convert. In the book of Judges, in Joshua, Jethro's family came back as converts into Judaism. Thus, that's what sets the precedent that in Jethro's family there is an idea or element of converted to Judaism, while Jethro remains unpublished and it seems as he is in conversion to God. So that when somebody is converted to Judaism, he converted to Judaism. The Torah states that this person, he is converted out of the fear of God. And I guess ultimately it's a test for him to elevate his status of fear into a level of a higher fear, which in Torah Hebrew is called yira, which would be awe or reverence. But that's a tremendous step, to go from the fear of punishment, fear of not being good enough, or whatever fear a person has in converting, to elevate it to the reverence or awe, basically to the point of divine revelation. I don't think we can all do something in spirituality to the point that we expect a revelation. But Noahide really brings a different element into the story. And this is where Jethro is coming from. Jethro as the Noahide. What does the Torah, the Rashi say in the Torah portion, Jethro? Jethro loved God. Well, here's a fantastic new revelation for us. All the time you talk about the fear of God, and then when we say Shema, what does it say? Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, Hashem our God, Hashem is one. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Le'olam Va'ed. Blessed is the glorious name, his kingship may live forever and ever. The next word, Ve'ahavta, and you should love. Ve'ahavta, Hashem your God. So now that we understand the precedent that Jethro was a lover of God, which this shouldn't be a surprise for Noahide either, because Abraham was called Avraham Ohavi, Abraham the lover, my lover. Now, where did Abraham learn about the love of God? Shem is really the sole founder of the love of God, because Shem was the original one to be called Shem Ohavi, Shem my lover. So Abraham was really not a Sinai Jew. He was a quasi-status of Jew Noahide. And thus Abraham had the status of being Avraham Ohavi, Abraham my lover. We don't really see the love of God after Abraham until Jethro bursts on the scene in the book of Shemos. And then we find that Jethro loved God. So here we have an interesting scenario. You have converts to Judaism converting out of the fear of God, and Jethro is this really brand new type of convert who does it out of the love of God. So then we find here a system of conversion. Again, you can convert to Judaism any way you want. You can wake up one day and decide, I'm Jewish, and you go to classes, and you do what you have to do, and you convert, and you're done. Now you are a Jew. But the Noahide, he's in conversion in a different way. He's, again, we already said he's converted. His conversion, constant, continuous, is out of the love of God. But if everybody went through Noahide, which is the way that the rabbis of old have stated the best way of learning Torah is from two camps, Jewish and Noahide. Does everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let me just, somebody said they lost me there. Okay, let me start over. To be in the Torah, the Jewish camp of Torah and the Noahide camp of Torah, really you require both. Abraham learned the Torah his own way, and Abraham then learned the Torah from Shem. Isaac learned the Torah, let's say from a Jewish angle, from Abraham, and then Isaac went into the academy of Shem and Aver. All the time, what the rabbis have stated is that as much as you're in the Jewish perspective of Torah, you should also learn the Torah from Shem in the Noahide perspective. The Noahide obviously has his perspective of Torah, and he, just as Jethro went to Moses at Sinai who had the revelation, the Noahide seeks the Torah from the Jewish camp. But again, let us not forget, the Jewish camp requires the Torah from the Noahide camp, which we'll get into later on today. So now that both sides are a precedent, and if one is to be in conversion to God, so you can't just start off in the Jewish camp. You can't just wake up one day and say, I'm Jewish. And a Jew can't wake up one day and say, I'm done with Judaism, I'm a Noahide. So there has to be a repair of schism. We've talked about this before. Has to be a repair of schism. I am Jewish, and I'm learning Torah from, let's say, the side of Shem. And the Noahide would say, I come from Shem, and I want to learn the Torah as it was given to Moses on Sinai. That's the repair of schism. The reason why I say this is, Jethro was in conversion to God, and then maybe he became a convert to Judaism. And I think what this does is it eliminates anything that's not for the sake of God or Torah for its own right. That if Jethro's in conversion out of love, and then he were to convert out of love to Judaism, then this level of fear will be erased and it'll be immediately turned into awe. This is not talking about levels. It's maybe your soul has an inclination to serve God out of awe, or maybe the Noahide chooses to remain a Noahide and develop his levels of love, but the love itself will turn into awe. And then again, maybe the person who converts to Judaism, his level of awe and love will be growing together. He's in conversion out of love, that he wants to focus on the awe, whereas Noahide would focus on the love that would turn into awe. It's just different styles of reaching the same goal, to fear and love God. And fear here means awe. Now, the reason why this might be the most authentic converting or conversion is if you don't go through Noahide, then you never know what Noahide is. So if a person goes through Noahide and says, I want to focus more on awe than love, then maybe it's obvious then that he has a Jewish soul. Which again, it's not about levels or whatever else, it's about preference. And if he is in Noahide, and he was going to convert, but then goes to Noahide, realizes he's a Noahide, maybe he feels more comfortable in his own skin as a Noahide. The Noahide Torah really is a revelation of who we are. It's a self revelation. And the idea is that this doesn't apply just only for Noahides. Because when Isaac went to learn the Torah from Shem, we don't know if Isaac ever left. I mean, he learned from Abraham his whole life, and then he went to Shem after the Akedah. How long was Isaac learning the Torah from Shem? Probably a very long time. So just as much as the Noahide would go into the Jewish camp also visits the Noahide camp. And then what you have is you have balance and equality. You're not saying everyone come to Judaism. Because by nature, when a potential convert to Judaism would go through Noahide, out of the love of God, inevitably what you're going to do is create a bridge for the two nations to mingle in Torah. Thus you would find more Jews coming to learn the Torah from the Noahide. That's really the equality that the Torah seeks. Is that the Torah comes with two perspectives. Let's just call it the Abraham perspective and the Shem perspective. And they're both equal, they're both different, they're both essential. I think they both represent the love and fear of God. So that's really how Jethro could have been both a convert and in conversion. I want to focus on this other topic. The Ramban states that when Moses met Jethro, he uses the words, all who become acquainted with Judaism, they are to call by themselves another name in Israel. Now there's a point that a Jewish person who's not religious, if he goes to a Torah lecture, it's kind of a cliche, that he puts on his yarmulke, his head covering, before the class, and during the class he wears it, and when he's done with the class, he takes off his yarmulke. So when he's affiliated with Judaism, actively, he puts on his yarmulke, and when he's through being affiliated for the day, he removes his yarmulke. The Jewish people, really, their inclination of soul is to study the Torah all the time. Does it happen this way? No. But is it supposed to be that way? Yes. So that now we have Jethro and Moses. Jethro, who left Mount Sinai before the revelation. That way he could come back to Sinai and receive the Torah teaching from Moses, as is going to be the dictum of all of the time. That Moses received the commandment from God, and to be a Noahide who is commanded and does, accepts the Torah as it was given to Moses. Why did Hashem set it up this way? Because schism is how you repair schism. And we've stated this before, that if Jethro had been present at Mount Sinai, Jethro would have got his set of instructions, Moses would have had his, Moses goes on his way, Jethro goes on his, and the two split. And in the end, it's a total schism for all of time. Whereas if there is an imposed schism, Jethro comes back to Moses to get the revelation. Then through schism, a divinely ordained schism, eventually what you're going to have is the repair of schism, but the repair of schism will identify with two distinct nations. The Jew receiving the Noahide Torah, because the Noahide says, I am a Noahide. And the Noahide will receive the Jewish Torah, as the Jew will say, I am a Jew. Now, it's not an arrogance or an ego to say, I am this or I am that. Because if you don't stand up for who you are, then you get lost. If the Noahides are just to merge into Judaism, what happened to Noahide? And if the Jewish people are not a nation, then they go to learn the Torah from the Noahide or Shem, then what happens to the Jewish people? So from schism, being locked into your individuality, that's really how unity comes about. Schism creates the repair of schism. Thus Jethro left Mount Sinai to come back to receive the revelation from Moses. Thus all that become acquainted with Judaism have another name in Israel. We talked about Jethro getting a name change. Right? He did 4 things. He took a mikvah, a ritual bath, circumcision, and a sacrifice to God, and he had 7 names. As the Vilna Gaon says, a rabbi of the year 1740, everybody has 7 names, at least. So there's a precedent that when in the learning of Torah, that there should be, on the Jewish side, the ability to identify with a Torah Hebrew name. What this does is it's a revelation to the person who he is, to who he is in God, in terms of his God relationship, who he is within Torah, who he is. A name is an identification. The Noahide is identifiable. So this is what the Ramban is saying. All that become acquainted with Judaism, they go by another name in Israel. Now the question we're going to explain here is, Jethro, as he came back to Moses, who says that the Noahide comes to the Jew? It almost sounds kind of pompous to suggest that all through time, that it's the Noahide that has to become acquainted with Judaism. What about the Jew becoming acquainted with the Noahide? Excuse me. So there's a very famous precedent of this. And it's the most important precedent in certain respects that there is. I don't know how many of you know the story of Pinchas and Yiftach. Yiftach was a judge in the book of Judges. And Pinchas, as the Torah portion Pinchas, the same Pinchas, was the priest, high priest. Yiftach made a vow. I forget the exact details of the vow. Something along the lines of if the next person to appear, to come out as such and such, my daughter will be an offering to God. Something along those lines. So it ended up being that his vow was activated. So they call her the daughter of Yiftach, the Bas Yiftach. So she was confined to death in solitude. And she was never with a man. And the only one that could nullify the vow was Pinchas. Now, Pinchas was a very esteemed man. He was the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. Yiftach was a judge. So they got into a major feud. Pinchas said, shouldn't the person who's sick come to the person with the cure? And Yiftach said, I'm the judge of the land. He should come to me. In the end, Pinchas didn't go to Yiftach, and Yiftach didn't go to Pinchas. And Yiftach's daughter remained in solitude, never had a family. Yiftach died a horrible death, and Pinchas lost the revelation of the Shekhinah. Just to answer a question in the side passing, Moses' sons and wife had their status as a Jew because they were at Sinai. They stayed at Sinai for the revelation. So now that you have Pinchas and Yiftach, each one really had a claim of being right. You should come to me, I should come to you. They each had their position, they each had their stance. So the punishment meted out to both of them was just. Because really you could say Yiftach was supposed to go to Pinchas. Maybe Pinchas saw that Yiftach wasn't going to come, so Pinchas should have been mavater. He should have given in and just gone to Yiftach. So here, I think this is the same precedent of the Jew and the Noahide. The Rambam explains very clearly that the Noahide, to relive Sinai, he literally has the ability to relive Sinai by accepting Noahide conversion to God based on the revelation as it was given to Moses on Sinai. And this is why the Ramban says all that become acquainted with Judaism are to go by another name in Israel. Let's just say, what if you just don't feel comfortable? What if you just don't feel comfortable to do this? So that means that the Jewish response would be, don't just say, well, sorry about your luck. That's when you have to do the repair of Pinchas and Yiftach, and you go to the Noahide camp. And you bring the Torah to them. And at that point, it's not proselytizing, it's not forced conversion, it's teaching the Torah to the world. What does the Navi say, the prophet? You should be a light to the nations. So either way, the light to the nations gets accomplished. But again, schism is the repair of schism. Yisro or Jethro did in fact come back to Moses. But then again, if you don't feel comfortable, then there is a precedent that the Jewish people should reach out to the Noahide as a repair of Pinchas and Yiftach. Okay, so I think that's the basic understanding of the conversion of Jethro, and how in Hebrew the word is it's a plan, it's a program that to recognize Noahide first. What it does is it gives identity to Noahide. It allows Jews to come to Noahide. It allows Noahides that are not Noahides to realize that they're Jewish. It allows Noahides that think they're Jewish to realize maybe they're not Jewish, remain a Noahide, and receive the Torah from Noahide, from the Jews that come to Noahide. It also creates a nation of Noahide to go and get the Torah from the Jews. It's a relationship, in every which way possible, that from the love of God and the fulfillment of experiencing what Noahide is. Again, what is the conversion to God from love? Then it creates an elevation and fear to awe. And I think everybody has their place from the engine called the Noahide. The Noahide can become a Jew. He can decide to remain a Noahide. The Jew can be a Jew in relation to Noahide. The Jew can come and learn Torah from the position of the Noahide. But if you don't have the program installed of Jethro the Noahide, then the nation fizzles out. And then you get converting to Judaism that's not pure. You have Judaism that's too egocentric. You have Noahides that are lost. But once you establish the Noahide nation in Jethro, then all the different branches that come out of it can exist. It can exist in a very healthy way. And all of a sudden the levels and status equations are gone. It's a sole choice at that time. If you want to be a Jew, if you want to be a Noahide, if you want to be a Jew in the Jewish camp, if you want to be a Jew in the Noahide Torah. That's ultimately the repair of schism by the maintaining of one's identification. And then just to reiterate, we explained how Jethro in conversion to Judaism is an obvious answer to the rabbinical writings. But Jethro as the convert or in conversion to God Noahide, that really answers the writings of the rabbis in a very clear way. And then to go back on it, can you say he converted to Judaism? And the answer would be yes, but from the love of God to an elevation to the awe of God. So where do we have a precedent of Jethro to have two levels? Again, the Zohar explains there's two levels of priesthood to Jethro. There's the level of Midian, the priest of Midian, and the priest of On. And one is called a Sphira, and one is called a Partsuf, which means, in basic terms, a small level and a big level. And we're not talking small and big for importance. We're talking about in terms of the greater stretch. it's more appropriate to say the small level, which means the most direct answer to Jethro is that he was in conversion out of love to Noahide. And the bigger stretch of the imagination is to convert to Judaism. Thus, we see two precedents in Jethro. This, just for if anyone does background knowledge, this corresponds to the sphera, the emanation of Yesod, the level of righteousness, the smaller level, the bigger level, which is Zeranpin, the small face. Now, Jethro, as we said, did four things. Changed his name, went for a ritual bath, gave an offering to God, and did circumcision. The circumcision aspect, Jethro held that circumcision was basically an essential to Noahide. Thus, his conversion to God out of love, he did so with a bris milah, circumcision. And this is why the Torah says he gave a holy offering to God. Where's the precedent to have a circumcision? The Bnei Keturah, the sons or offspring of Keturah, went through circumcision. Keturah is the Noahide name of Hagar, and Hagar being the wife of Abraham. It's interesting that Hagar is spelled Hey Gimel Resh, Hagar, in Hebrew. But if you rearrange the letters, it spells Gerah, the female convert. It says in the Torah, she remained righteous, and she was never with another man after she was exiled from Abraham. And Abraham took her back, and she was Keturah, which means incense, and they had their children from her. Now her first son, Ishmael, maintained circumcision. As we know that when Abraham got circumcised, Ishmael did too. And Ishmael guarded the circumcision till this day. So Jethro understands that Ishmael is one of the stronger elements of Noahide, as he is a spark of holiness from Abraham. And this is why, I think, why the Temple Mount is governed by Ishmael today. As he really has a place in Noahide, and it's his challenge to really come to terms with who he is and how he identifies with the world. And I think he's the opposite of the normative Noahide. When I say opposite, we're not speaking better or for worse. We're talking opposite ends of the spectrum. Just like chesed and gevura in Kabbalistic terms, positive and negative. Ishmael really, he believes he's Jewish without believing he's Jewish. But again, it's not about levels or status or I'm Jewish, I'm not Jewish. Ishmael has to come to terms with who he is. And he is the nation that took on the circumcision to this day. So Jethro understood the nature of Ishmael. Jethro thinks, or has a position, that there's actually a quasi-eighth commandment to the Noahide of a proactive measure of circumcision. This would correspond to the 7 names of Jethro, upon which he would have a quasi-eighth name. His initial name, Jethro, or the father-in-law of Moses. So if you count all Jethro's names, it comes out to 8. But the 8th is a quasi one, so he has 7. This is the same scenario with the circumcision. 7 with a quasi-8th. Thus, Jethro brings us to, again, the 4 different levels of proactive Noahide. Circumcision, ritual bath, mikveh, offering, and name change. Jethro did all of them. So when we talk about the ritual bath, the point of that really is to do something holy on the level of makif, of surrounding. The ritual bath in Judaism has its own connotation, its own set of conditions. But why would Jethro undergo a ritual bath? I think what it is, for the Noahide, it's the proactive physical emanation of doing something holy. And what it does is it's a total immersion in holiness. I mean, think about it, that's what water is. That's what you do. You immerse in water. I think by immersing in the water, it's an emanation of something holy. It's a clinging to holiness. It's the idea that if your body in perpetual physical motion and a forward progress, the ritual bath is an emanation of something holy. What it is, it's a clinging to holiness that you should cling to holiness. And by clinging to holiness, it's a way that the body will become acclimated to emanating holiness itself. Now, the action are the 7 commandments. This is true of any law. When it says that the 613 laws of the Torah correspond to the 613 parts of the body. Thus, with the Noahide, the 7 laws of Noah, every day we're tested with the 7 laws of Noah. Everybody. And most likely we probably fail the first time every day of all 7 tests. But there is the idea of repentance. This is explained in the book of Bahir, in Kabbalah. The first 7 are an introduction to the day of righteousness. Probably we all fail. And then you get a second set of 7 tests. And what that is, it's a chance for repentance and to come closer to God. And by succeeding in the 7 tests every day, you begin to become acclimated of performing holiness in the 7. So when you proactively do the things that Jethro did, there's the idea of acquaintanceship in Torah. There's the idea of a circumcision if you're a man. There's the idea of bringing an offering to God in the times of the temple. And the ritual bath is kind of a way to start your day in something holy. It's an emanation starter. It's a way of putting your body, it's an alignment. You put your body aligned to emanating something holy. So when you come out of the mikveh, out of the ritual bath, your body's in program. You're putting a program upon it to make it act out holiness. And I think what that is, it's a major aid in passing 7 tests daily. And again, this applies for everybody. That everybody in the whole world starts their day off with 7 tests of the 7 laws. And again, they probably fail. And then as the day goes on, you get a chance to repair. And we're going to talk about momentarily how those 10 commandments correspond to the 7 laws of Noah and the 3 proactive things that we can do. As it was stated in a comment, Batia was found in the mikveh when she found Moses. That's correct. Some believe that she was converting to Judaism, and that's why she was at the mikveh. But again, if she was not converting to Judaism, there would be then again a precedent that she was doing exactly this. And it makes sense, because her father was Jethro, I believe. I know it says her father was Pharaoh, but I think there's a midrash that Batia and Zipporah were sisters at the market, and they were adopted, one by Jethro and one by Pharaoh. So let's go ahead and talk about the Ten Commandments now. Before we do that, we talked about the emanation of holiness and getting the body immersed in holiness to act out holiness. And then there's the offering to God, circumcision, and the name. Okay. You know what? Before we get to the Ten Commandments, I want to talk about this. The Noahide is explained in the Rambam. He comes from the world. He comes from the world to come. He inherits the world to come because his world is the world to come. Thus, the world to come is in the world called Bria, creation. But if you break up the name of Bria, creation, it becomes Beria, with vision. The Noahide has vision. He sees the Torah all around him. But he doesn't all the time know how to identify with the Torah that he sees. So the Jewish element in the repair of schism is the wisdom to help interpret the vision. And the Jew lacks the vision. So when the Jew has the, let's say, Torah wisdom, he doesn't have the vision. He doesn't see the Torah activated. As a gross analogy, you know the movie Hear No Evil, See No Evil, Hear No Evil? The movie with Eddie Murphy and Gene Wilder. But in that movie, it's the idea of, one person has a limitation and another has a limitation, and their strengths really come to complement each other. So the world of vision is where the world to come is located. So by nature, the Noahides are there. But it's when the two cooperate together, they can interpret the vision together. What this is the sanctification of God. That at this level you can behold Torah in the world, holiness in the world, God in the world. You can begin to perceive how the world really is divine and not the falsehood that we're led to believe that it is. Again, because the Noahide sees, but doesn't always know what he sees. So when I hear Torah from a Noahide, the Noahide usually says, this is just what I think, or this is what I see. And for me, I can hear it very clear, because I come from a Torah knowledge, and I see, wow, the Noahide totally sees the Torah of God. And the other way is for when the Jew understands the wisdom of the Torah, but he doesn't see it in the world. So I think when the two come together, it's a revelation of Torah that it's this, again, the schism that's repaired. There's the repair of schism. So when the Jewish people stood at Mount Sinai, and they said, Nasa v'nishma, we will do and we will listen. Again, there's another term in Torah called Davar b'toch Davar, or Shema b'koli. Davar b'toch Davar, a matter hidden within a matter. Shema b'koli, listen in my voice. So the Jews said, Nasa, we will do. And then they said, we will listen, V'nishma. I think the Noahide is present at Sinai. Really, his voice is there. As it says, everybody in the Torah was at Sinai. Shem was at Sinai waiting for the revelation of Torah. As the Midrash says, he went and went to die at Sinai for 1,300 years. So when the Jewish people answered for the world, Nasa v'nishma, we will do and we will listen, I think inside that we will listen, there was the relationship of something called two that is really one. The Vilna Gaon brings down this principle all the time. Two that are really one. I am Hashem your God, you should have no other gods. Two commandments that are really one. Male and female, two that are really one. Nasa v'nishma, we will do and we will listen. Two that are really one. And the two nations that are there are two, a schism, but really are one. How are the two really one? That there's a theoretical end of time. The theoretical end of time, schism would be totally repaired. Thus the Noahide would have his full conversion, and the Jew would receive the Torah of the Noahide. But again, the end of time is theoretical. There is no end of time. Because in the world to come, there is no time. It goes forever. But in a theoretical end of time, if you were to achieve the result of the end of time, what you would have is the two nations would be one and repair a schism. But since it's theoretical, then we go through time repairing the schism, getting closer and closer, which makes a bigger and greater revelation of Torah. And when we talked about Aravna the last couple weeks, the Noahide on the Temple Mount with King David. So Aravna was called a king, and King David obviously was called a king. If you look in the end of the book of Samuel 2, when David buys the Temple Mount, it's very ambiguous who's talking to who. The king said to him, the king said to him, because Aravna was the king and David was the king. When Shem and Abraham were on the Temple Mount, the end of the passage says he gave him Meiser from everything. He gave him a tenth of everything. The Zohar poses the question, who gave to who? It's ambiguous. Did Abraham give to Shem or did Shem give to Abraham? Well, David and Aravna, or the righteous Noahide, who was called a Ger Tzedek, and that's where we get the precedent that a Noahide is called a Ger, a convert. Because Aravna was not a Jew, he was a Noahide, yet he was called a Ger Tzedek, a righteous convert. It's ambiguous who really was who here. I mean, the Torah is very strange there. It says the king this, then the king that, and they're both called the king. The level of Aravna is going to be a major theme in our Torah discussion for basically forever. Because he was what was called Sar Mitzudas Tzion, the prince, the host of the foundation rock of Zion, which is the Holy of Holies. It says by Ishmael that there are 12 princes of Ishmael. The 12 princes of Ishmael, as much as they were in this world, they were actually rooted in heaven, Shemayim. That they had their roots in a spiritual domain. Thus we find here as well is that the Noahides have this level called Sar Mitzudas Tzion, which I think the most basic premise to understand who the Noahides are to God from Aravna would be a nation of princes. Because the Sar is the minister, and we learn from Ishmael that a Sar is a Nasi, and a Nasi is a prince. So I think the Noahides would be, this is what I think, would be best termed, and this is a Rashi that states Sar Mitzudas Tzion, the minister of the foundation rock of Zion, a nation of princes. So now we get into Aravna. It says that there was wheat on the threshing floor, which fits good because when Isaac was praying at the Temple Mount, when he was awaiting Rivka, his wife, to come, Rebecca, it says that the Temple Mount was a field. So the field element is very good. And this is called Garon, Gimel Reish Nun, the threshing floor, the wheat. Now, we had talked about the Noahide in constant conversion as opposed to converted, which means it's a present, continuous, and forever, constant condition of conversion. So Garon really is the same letters as Geron. In Hebrew, the letters Gimel Reish Vav Nun would spell constant conversion. So you see that Aravna, whose name means the yearning of light, with David, their partnership at the Temple Mount was really forever. That David may have bought the Temple Mount off of Aravna, and the temple is going to be built there by Solomon eventually, all the way till today where we await the third temple. David and Aravna brought down that schism and the repair of schism in its very first revelation to the world. And the Noahide is rooted in that foundation stone. When the two come together really in harmony, that's what will be the means to bring the third temple onto the Temple Mount. The fact that Ishmael governs the Temple Mount today is not a coincidence. As really when the Noahide and Jew come together in terms of Torah, the way is brought down by Aravna, David, Jethro, Shem, Abraham, all the characters. When the imposed divine schism begins its final reparations, that's when the sale of the Temple Mount will become complete. And then it'll be available to be freed up for the third temple revelation. Now, to end for today, thank God we got through everything for this week. And then we're going to go back to our Torah of Shem, unless we come up with more of Jethro. Let's go over the 10 Commandments. I am Hashem your God. You should have no other gods. Don't make an image of me. Don't take my name in vain. Shabbat. Honor your parents. Don't kill. No adultery. Don't steal. Don't bear false witness. And don't covet. It seems to me that there's 10 commandments really breaks down to 7 and 3. So I think we can apply the 7 laws of Noah and the 3 proactive measures of Jethro also in the 10 commandments. Don't covet. Don't eat the limb of a live animal. It's a lustful thing, I think. I think the Torah is telling you, and these are conceptual. We're learning the 7 laws as a concept, not to lust. Bear false witness, to have a righteous court system. Stealing. Adultery, immorality. Killing. Take Hashem's name in vain. Blasphemy. No image of God, no other gods. Idolatry. That leaves us with 3 laws. I am Hashem your God, Shabbos, and honoring your parents. So we'll learn honoring your parents. This is the sacrifice that Jethro gave an offering. Why did Jethro give a holy offering in the Torah portion of Jethro? The answer is, a Noahide really is not supposed to give what's called a shlomim. It's a particular offering that the Jewish people bring. So why did Jethro do it? Jacob was a Noahide, and he did the same thing. He gave a shlomim, which has a connotation of a certain level of offering, and he did it in the name of his father Isaac. And the Ramban explains this, in the commentary of the Ramban, that he gave an offering in particular to honor his father. So I think what Jethro did when he gave an offering is he was bringing the Noahides back to their forefathers Shem, Noah, and ultimately where the Jewish people, the Noahides, came together with Abraham and Shem. So honoring your parents, honoring your forefathers, honoring where you came from, that's the offering. Shabbat. On Shabbat, a Jewish person can do a circumcision, and he even has the ability to break the laws of Shabbos. Thus, the circumcision and Shabbos go together for the Noahide, because Shabbos is, as we know, the Jewish people keep the 39 labors that are prohibited. Yet, for a Noahide to honor God, to make the day holy, because the day is holy, even for the Noahide, that a day for God, that really is the honoring God that Shabbos brings about. And the circumcision is the element that you can honor God through what's called the breaking of Shabbos. Now, the Jewish person keeps the Shabbos, but when he does circumcision, he breaks Shabbos. So for the Noahide, the circumcision represents honoring God at all levels. And I am Hashem, your God, is the mikvah, the ritual bath, which really is the immersion in holiness, the immersion in godliness. So what you have is a framework of the 7 laws, and 3 extra laws correspond to the 3 proactive measures that there are to do to really bring the intellect into the midot, the traits that allows one to be righteous every day. Now with those 10 sets of commandments, every day when we're approached with the 7 laws of Noah, we can achieve righteousness through the passing the test of righteousness by understanding that every day is a conceptual arena of the laws of Noah, and by the proactive measures it gives us the intellect to remind ourselves that we are of God, we are holy, we are in Torah. This is universal, Noahide and Jew alike. So I think it's the Torah of the Noahide ultimately the ways into the 10 Commandments that allows one to pass the laws and tests of righteousness every day. And the last thing we're going to say before we sign off for this week is that when the Noahide merits the world to come, the Rambam calls them Chasidei Umas Ha'olam, the righteous of the nations of the world. And the word for nations is umos, or in Sephardi pronunciation, umot. Aleph Vav, Mem Vav Taf. And that's plural for nations. But if you look at the word it means craft. And the word for craftsman in Hebrew is uman. And what do we say about Shem? Is he was the master craftsman. As he helped build the Ark of Noah, that was his craft. And as the 4 craftsmen of redemption, Messiah, son of David, Messiah, son of Joseph, Elijah, and the righteous priest Shem, son of Noah. He was an uman. He was a craftsman. Thus, what we find that the Noahides of the world, their distinguishing mark of being a Noahide, and Abraham is no different. For when Abraham met with Shem on the Temple Mount, Abraham was termed by in the book of Isaiah a goldsmith. He learned his craft from Shem. Thus, the righteous of the nations of the world, the Noahide has his craft. He knows his craft of God. He knows his passion. Everybody has a passion. It says I gave an article in last week's Torah portion. The service of the Holy Temple, each service was called a Torah. And that by working the craft becomes a Torah. And from the craft is a revelation of Torah. So, for example, the mincha offering there's a Torah involved in it. That the more you contemplate and you master your craft of the mincha offering, you learn the whole Torah. And as the Midrash says, you can learn the whole Torah from the laws of the priesthood. And the Torah says that anybody who learns the Torah is on the level of a high priest. Thus, when a Noahide learns Torah, he's on the level of a high priest. Thus, from his craft, he can learn the whole Torah, as he's also called Adam. And what we find is that Jethro really also was a craftsman, but not like Shem. Shem worked on the ark. Abraham became a craftsman through Shem. Jethro was a spiritual craftsman. He had the ability to see and construct concepts of light. He constructed the Sanhedrin. And from the Sanhedrin, that's the gift of Jethro, of seeing how the Torah has a craft in it. Even if you're not with the labor of your hands, there's a craft of Torah. And Jethro was a craftsman. Thus, he goes back to Shem in terms of craft. And Aravna, in his passage with King David, was also a craftsman, and David recognized Aravna as his craft. And so what the point is that we're starting to find a common theme between the templates of Noahides in the Torah: Shem, Aravna, and Jethro. We're starting to see who they were as people, and the concepts that we extract from the writings of the Torah and rabbinical literature will allow us to understand and describe the Noahide in the Torah. So that today, the Noahide can identify with who he is in the Torah. And again, what we brought out of Jethro is that he was a righteous convert, a Ger Tzedek, and we understand what the word conversion means. There's a craft involved, there's a proactive approach. All the things that we talked about is how the Noahide has a real self-realization of who he is, and how through the schism is the repair of schism, and there's a bridge involved that not only can the Noahide accept the Torah as brought by the revelation of Moses on Sinai, but that the Jew can learn the Torah from the side of the Noahide as well. And we saw this as the precedent of the world to come, and the world to come is really the harmony that exists between the two people through the seeing and hearing. And the Nasv and Ishma, we will do, we will listen. So all I can say is, from Jethro, we learn basically the nature of the Jew, the nature of the convert, and the nature of the conversion. And how it all boils down to Jethro's premise is the love of God, and Shem was called Shem, my lover. God called Shem my lover. That's all for this week. See you next time. Thank you very much.